everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Let's Talk Comics, the official Image Comics podcast where we go one-on-one with your favorite creators in the business to find out how they got in, why they got in, what they're still doing in comics, and what they've got coming up. And today's episode is a fun one because I've got Aditya Bidikar. He's on the show. And look, if you said, oh, that name sounds really familiar, it's because, one, you've seen his work in a bunch of places. He is one of the best letterers in comics right now. Period. But that's only half of what this episode is. This episode is really about someone who has been behind the scenes on some of your favorite books for a real long time and basically gets to a point where he says, all right, my turn. I've got a story. I've got something I want to say. Aditya's new series is In Your Skin, and it comes out in April with artist Som. And this thing is body horror. It is obsession. It is about identity. It is fandom taken to a place that gets real uncomfortable real fast. It's like if Cronenberg directed The Substance on the backdrop of Bollywood. We are going to get into how he broke in, how lettering actually controls how you read a comic, which I think is something that newer folks to comics, I think, sometimes overlook. And then we go deep on this book. He tells us where the idea came from and how it's kind of been incubating for quite a bit, what it's really about, and really why now is the time to tell the story. If you want to support the show, before we get into it, you know what to do. Take a screenshot, share it on social, tag me, tag Atya, tag Image. We will reshare the heck out of it. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Leave a comment on Spotify. All right, if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's talk comics. Atya, welcome.
Hello. It's
Man,
nice
we were talking a little bit before we started, and I am grateful enough that you have listened to the show, so you basically know the whole rigmarole. So you know the fun we're going to get into today. So that being said, first question, ask everyone: was comics always the goal? Were you going to do something else? Were you going to be, a rocket scientist, a biochemical engineer, or a farmer somewhere? What was the original goal, and how did we get to comics?
I think when I was 8, I wanted to be a herpetologist, like a snake person.
All right.
But I would say ever since I actually knew what I wanted to do, I wanted to be a creator.
Okay.
And the first kind of creator I wanted to be was a writer. So I had read comics as a kid. I grew up on these Indian comics for kids and like some Indian superhero comics, which were kind of ripoffs of like Batman, Spider-Man, etc.
Sure.
Like we had a guy who has like these snakes that come out of his hands, but like it's essentially Spider-Man with snakes. Yeah. So I read all of those and I loved them. But what really got me going in the early days was Edgar Allan Poe and Charles Dickens and novelists like that. So I wanted to be a big, serious novelist at the age of 13. I even wrote a bunch of like prose novels as I saw them, but they were like 10-page stories. And I found out how much hard work it is. And that's actually what I wanted to do. I think from the age of 13 to about 18, 19, I wanted to be a prose short story writer, novelist. Of course, as I was growing up back then is when the prose market started sort of imploding.
Right.
Yeah, most of my favorite writers came up through like short story magazines, which no longer existed by the time I was grown up. I think the New Yorkers left pretty much.
That's the last one. Yeah.
I remember Stephen King got a start like publishing short stories with Playboy. I don't know if like those exist now.
Nope.
Like people used to actually read Playboy for the articles.
For the stories. That's it. People, it was everyone's excuse. I'm just reading it for the articles.
Exactly. So I always wanted to be a writer, and then at the age of 18 or 19, I was in the library. I saw this magazine like a film magazine called Sight and Sound. Like it's a great British magazine.
Mhm.
And they had an article which was one of those like Biff Bam Boom comics for grown, like,
Mm.
not for kids anymore kind of thing. And I took a piece of paper, I made a list of all the comics that they had mentioned, because those comics felt like something I would like to read.
Okay.
Right. Like before that, I was like, okay, superheroes are fine, everything. But I'm an adult. I read like proper adult stuff. These were the comics that I felt like, okay, I might want to read these, like Mouse, Watchmen,
Mm.
Persepolis, things like that.
Right. The classics.
Yeah. And that was, I think, when I knew I needed to be in comics. Like I read those and I was like, this medium is like nothing else.
Mhm.
It's doing things that I don't think any other medium can do. And I would love to try and kind of dig into that. So that was when I knew it had to be comics. Like anything but in comics. I don't mind if it's writing, I don't mind if it's something else, but it has to be comics.
What did you think the road to get there looked like back then?
I think because I came from prose,
Mhm.
I knew that the key thing was to do the thing.
Mm.
Right. I don't think I ever went into this idea that, okay, somebody's gonna look at my, like, somebody's gonna decide that, okay, Aditya should write comics. Right. I knew I needed to make them happen. I think one of the first things I ever did was like a 1-page experimental comic with somebody that I knew on Twitter.
Mhm.
Then I found somebody again on Twitter put me in touch with an artist who lived like 2 blocks away from me.
Okay.
So we got in touch and we started making comics together. We actually made comics for like 7 or 8 years. It was all short comics, like 4 pages and things like that. But
Mhm.
I knew that the answer was to make my own comics. It was
Mm.
always that.
Mhm.
And I think partly because I came from prose, but also I never thought I wanted to write other people's properties exactly. Like, I mean, I don't mind the idea, but that's never been a goal of mine.
Mhm.
It's always been about doing your own stories. So, yeah, like it was more expensive than prose for sure, because with prose, I could just do it on my own. And funnily enough, that's actually how I got into lettering, because I couldn't afford to pay a letterer.
Well, okay. Well, so let's talk about that, because like I think that's one of those things where uh for kind of like what you said, from a lot of people to break in, you have to do the thing, right? And usually it's writing or drawing. And I think people think that the lettering just kind of happens initially, or you find someone who will do it for you. But in order to do the find someone, people have to be doing it. And so I think for you, obviously you said you were doing your own. Was there a point where you were just did people ask you hey, who did your lettering? And you're like, oh, I did it. And they're like, oh, will you do mine? And is that how does the snowball start to roll down the hill for you to, then become the guy that people want?
It was pretty similar to what you just said. I uh, so I did this one short story with my friend. Like I
Mhm.
kind of lettered it myself, and it was horribly lettered. Like honestly, it was. I think it was one of the free Blambot fonts, and for which
Okay.
I will eternally be grateful to Nate because he puts out all these free fonts that people like me who couldn't afford anything could use.
Right.
It was one of those, and it was this horrible gray caption backgrounds that I used. I just had no idea what I was doing, and I lettered the 7-page story. And I met a British comic book writer who had come to Pune. Um, like Pune is where I live in India.
Mhm.
Tony Lee. So he said, "Hey, does anybody want to hang out in Pune?" So I was a comic book fan and I was a Doctor Who fan. So we kind of met up. We chatted Doctor Who, we chatted comics, and then I kind of very shyly asked him, like, "Hey, I've done this comic. Like, would you look at it? Would you just tell me if I'm doing anything wrong?" And first of all, he told me like, okay, you need like half the words that you're using,
Mhm.
because you're saying a lot of things that your artist is already doing on the page. And he said like, the art is great, but what have you done with the lettering? And I was like, what do you mean? And he actually walked me through like a page and like the entire story, like 7 pages. He walked me through, okay, if you move this caption here, then the reader's eye moves this way. And this is how you can kind of guide the reader's eye around the page. And that was my light bulb moment about lettering, because that was the first time I figured that, okay, this can actually be something. And I started learning it, but again, this was just for myself. Like this was just to letter my own stuff. Um, Also, I have severe attention issues, so like I just like new things to keep me busy. So I started doing that. I was on the digital webbing forum, like
Oh,
lettering forum, where people like
classics.
Todd Klein, John Workman, Nate Picos, Tom Orzechowski, all these people were hanging out, and so I was literally presenting my pages to like the best in the medium, and they were telling me what I was doing wrong. It was fantastic.
Mhm.
And I think an Indian company put out a call for writers. And by the time I kind of sent my submission, they'd already gotten enough writers. But they were like, hey, what else can you do? Like, do you do anything else? Do you draw? Do you like something else? And I was like, I letter, but I don't really do it professionally. And the CEO of the company was like, hey, you'll never find out if you're good enough to be a professional if you don't try, right? So why don't you do a couple of samples for us? And that led to my first lettering job.
Okay.
The first thing I lettered that I did not write. Um, I did that for 2 or 3 years. That was not my day job. I had like a day job at the time. I was writing as well. And then I think there came a point when I realized that I had to give up writing,
Mm.
because the audience that I was writing for didn't necessarily care for the things that I wanted to write. Like I knew that if I like I was far more influenced by the kind of comics I was reading, but my audience was in India who were far more interested in like 70s, 80s style superhero comics, and like I think
They
we were
wanted
kind of
more Snake Man.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I was like, okay, I have to give up writing, but I would still love to be connected to comics in some way. So that was when I kind of took the plunge into lettering for a living. Yeah.
Interesting. Look, I think this gets said about lettering all the time, but I would love to get your take on it. Where, I think when lettering is working, you don't notice it. But when it's not working, it can break a book, right? For you, what is lettering actually responsible for in a comic?
I think fundamentally lettering determines how you read the comic.
Hmm.
Because the artist might have done a fantastic storytelling job, but if I do a bad lettering job, I can really mess with them. Right? So if I do my job well, I can accentuate what the artist is trying to do. I can accentuate what the writer is trying to do. I essentially like I mean, I live in India and I talk to a lot of people who read comics more casually. So they'll basically read like 4 or 5 comics a year, pretty much. And it's sad to say, but they're not necessarily looking at the art,
Hmm.
right? They're looking at the writing, and the art is just as a reference for what's happening. Um, so there, like the lettering is what they're reading essentially. And even where you have an audience that is properly looking at the art, the lettering uh, can work with it or against. So I remember in my early years, somebody like an artist told me like, hey, you're messing with my action lines, right? Like I have these things happening in the panels, and like your lettering, like you're putting your lettering like slightly on top of that. So you're messing this up. Like, and I really started paying attention to that after like a year or so of doing it, because I started talking to artists and I started getting their perspective.
Hmm.
uh, because that's what you're doing. It's the lettering, while it has text in it, is a visual component of the page,
Mhm.
right? When I'm lettering, I'm thinking of shapes, and I'm thinking of flow, and I'm thinking of color. Like those
Right.
things are all working with the artwork. So
Yeah.
that's, I think, the fundamental role of a comic, sorry, of the letterer. So I often compare it to sound design in movies, where like the sound designer is not writing the dialogue, right? Like they're getting, like the dialogue is recorded somewhere else, but the sound designer is affecting how you are listening to the movie, when
Mhm.
where you're paying attention. Like they can either accentuate the visuals, they can detract from the visuals, or sometimes when they are not invisible, they can make you notice something that you're supposed to notice, which the visual might not be communicating entirely, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even when you say like, um, I think during my first 4 or 5 years, I was very annoyed by this thing that lettering should be invisible or something.
Mm.
But I've gotten much more mellow about it now.
Well, I think there's a performance element to it, right?
Yeah,
Because like not only that, like you help decide how a line is read, right? Like how loud it could potentially be, or even like how fast it moves.
yeah.
For you, are those decisions that you feel you get to make, or as you're doing it, or have you encountered writers who say like, well, no, I want it like it needs to be read this way? Like, how does the collaboration maybe work? Where like, okay, with an artist, it's more keep your bubbles out of the way, but with a writer, how are you collaborating with them to make sure that you're getting across what they want, but also making sure, like you said, like you as the sound designer in a sense you don't want your work to look, to look like crap, and so you
Yeah.
also want to make sure that there's how does talk me through a little bit of that.
Uh, it's a balance of collaboration. I think I used to say that when I am kind of coming up with the style options, I am collaborating with the artist a lot more, because
Mm.
we are trying to figure out how the style will look on top of the art. Will it
Okay.
match the line art? Will it kind of match the visual weight of the lines that the artist is putting in, that the colors are communicating, etc. But once that's set, my primary collaborator is the writer.
Mm.
Um, we are kind of going together and um, kind of determining how the script is going to be read, how the words are going to flow through the whole thing. And there are times when, like, I generally work with very collaborative writers, so they are very welcoming to my ideas, and also they are very um, clear and loud about their own. So with somebody like Ram V, for example, we'll go back and forth a lot. So he'll tell me like, "Hey, I don't think this is working. Can we do it this way?" And then we have a conversation where I'm like, "Okay, here's what I was trying to do, and does that work with what you're trying to communicate?" And then we'll try what he said, and then we'll kind of come up with a synthesis of it that kind of makes both of us happy, or is something that neither of us could have thought of on our own. So
Mhm.
with some writers, it's very collaborative. It's literally like, hey, let's try this. If it fails, we'll try something else. It's an iterative process, and like Ram particularly encourages trying until failure, so that okay, we can move back to the next step, like the step before if we need. But I would like to see how this looks. I would like to see how far we can push this. Right.
Mhm.
While there are other writers where okay, they give you the script and they're like, you do what you want, unless it's really messing with something I'm doing, it's fine.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. Uh, like Dennis Camp, for example, will
Mhm.
very rarely give me notes on the choices I'm making.
Okay.
Um, on the other hand, often it's the kind of the other way around. Like Dennis will often write like 3 or 4 options for the dialogue, and he's just like, Aditya, whichever you like, just put it in. Like, because
So when he's writing options for dialogue, is it? I mean, obviously, like one of the other things too to take into consideration is space, right? So is he
yeah.
giving you different lengths of dialogue, or is he giving you different options on how to thread it all together?
No, it's actually much more as a reader, because
Oh, okay.
because I'm also a writer. I have
Sure.
edited comics before, so I am much more involved in the storytelling of most of the comics that I letter than maybe other letters might be. I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, like with Dennis, it's like we are texting all the time, and he will often say that okay, I these are 2 lines that I think are both as good, but you decide. Right,
Mm.
like you tell me which one, and you just delete the one that you don't think is working. There was actually a note once I remember in 20th Century Man, where um, there's a particular double page spread that is a little bit difficult to read. As in, it's a little bit difficult to figure out exactly what's happening. so you
Sure.
have to read it carefully. And he kept saying, "Okay, do you think we need to change it?" And I was like, "No, I think it's great." And then in his final notes, he actually wrote a note for that page to try and fix the page. And I just replied saying, "Dennis, don't be a coward. We are not doing that." So sometimes it's like that. So
Sure.
I'm just trying to show like how collaborative it can be.
Yeah, no, I mean, I
Yeah.
love that because I think like the other thing too is like I think you mentioned it a little bit, like you get or in the part where you're working with the artist, you're working on, um, like a style of the balloon or captions or and even down to like we were talking about the Blambot fonts, right? So like, but for you, I imagine that you at this point now, like you've got your own that you work with, and I would imagine you make new ones depending on what the project is. What's that process like for you? Because that feels like almost a completely different kind of creative endeavor that you're doing for for a specific project per se, but also to, like you said, to make sure that there's clarity and it makes sense. um how do you build a good font?
That's a great question. I don't think anybody's asked me that. Um, I do use Blambot and Comic Craft fonts in my
Right.
work.
Mhm.
Um, but once in a while, early on in my career, when I didn't know how to kind of do typography and type design, and I didn't know how to design fonts, I would try and look at the thing that fits closest to what I'm thinking of.
Mhm.
Right. But eventually, I became skilled enough that I felt like, okay, you know what? This is like 80%, but I have something in my head that would look 100% correct with this.
Mm.
Um, the first attempt to do that was learning how to hand letter.
Okay.
So I've hand lettered two graphic novels, Graffiti's Wall and Blue and Green, both with Ramvi and Anand Radhakrishnan, Anand RK. And those were because I looked at Anand's art and I'm like, this looks like nothing else in comics.
Mm.
So how am I supposed to letter this with something that already exists? I
Mm.
I just couldn't. Like, we actually did try a couple of digital fonts, but then actually it was like over drinks that I asked Anand, how do you draw your pages? And he was like, I use gel pen on cartridge paper. And
Oh.
drunkenly I said, like, I'm gonna letter this book using gel pen on cartridge paper. And that kind of like, we always had like digital as a fallback, but that's
Right.
actually, I had to figure out hand lettering for that, and I had to
Mm.
figure out how to do it on paper.
Mhm.
Then for Blue and Green, I was like, okay, I couldn't make a font like this, but I would there's this manic energy that is kind of very highly repressed in this book, where clearly this man is very quiet, but there's this thing boiling inside him. I
Mm.
would love to do something that suggests that. And again, it was like hand lettering.
Mm.
Um, right. And so I did that again. But I think the first font I created was like a partial font. It was not even a complete one. It was for These Savage Shores, where These Savage Shores is kind of like an epistolary graphic novel. So
Okay.
each chapter is narrated through a letter that somebody is writing to somebody else. And then we
Oh.
came to this then we came to this letter that is supposed to be written in Malayalam, which is an Indian language that two of the characters speak. And I was like, I there's no font I can see that is going to communicate that we are thinking in Malayalam here. So I, inspired by like Unseal fonts. Unseal is like this old lettering, like vintage lettering style from Europe. I kind of combined that with the sort of round glyphs of Malayalam, and I kind of made my own font. And I was like, oh, okay. So whenever I see something in my head that is not real, I can actually make that happen. So that's actually how I started making fonts. And
Okay.
after that, it's been sometimes the fonts are just because I can see a font in my head, and I can kind of
Mhm.
make that up. Once in a while, it's a project. Well, so with In Your Skin, for example, I kind of made a font for that, but also like Resurrection Man. This was a DC project that Ram, Anand, and I did, and I knew that I wouldn't have the time to hand it to this. And of course, like, I don't think DC would be interested in that, but I did have but I did have enough time to kind of create a new font for that I felt would reflect the project well.
Mhm.
So mostly that's why I make fonts. I make
Okay.
fonts for specific things or um, specific eras. Like I kind of think that, okay, this is the next 6 months of my lettering career. So I want to kind of make something new to commemorate that. It's kind of like,
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. All right, one last lettering question before we get into more into In Your Skin. Is the is sound effects and things like that. Like I think I've seen a lot of scripts where sound effects are written in to some to for specific panels and things like that. But I also know that sometimes that they're added in as extra from the letterer. And so it's interesting because depending on what era of comic bookdom you grew up with, there are very different approaches to how sound effects are used. Going back to your comment on kind of being a sound designer in comics, right? Obviously, sound effects play into that. I guess like what makes a good sound effect that you feel, but then also too, like, what is your general approach to those and making them, because then the other thing too is like, how do you make them fit within the art that's happening itself too? So I'd love to hear more about that.
so sound sound effects are heavily a part of the page design.
Mm-hmm.
So I work backwards from what you just said, which was actually I start with what would fit this page, what would fit this panel. Um, so if it's an explosion, like what is the directionality of the thing? Um, and then I kind of work backwards to what I kind of want to do with this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and sound effects was one of the first things that I started doing by hand, like using like digital brushes, because that was the first time I felt a limitation between what I'm seeing in my head versus what's available. So I could see a sound effect in my head, but none of the fonts that were available were fitting that. Of course, like towards the beginning, I wasn't able to do that. I didn't have the skills. But then as I kind of developed the skills, more and more I started going towards that, where I will design the sound effect based on like I'll just draw it by hand. So if I know that, okay, let's say I need a boom that kind of fits the whole panel, but the panel itself is at an angle, I can just draw it with the M small and the F the biggest and kind of moving forward. Because I do also notice that a lot of font based effects very quickly start looking distorted. Like you can tell that this font is not meant to do this. So I very quickly wanted to kind of get out of that limitation. And when I started doing that, the first thing I did was just pour over all the hand lettering that I loved. So I went back and so Todd Klein, I feel, has transitioned to the digital realm the best in terms of sound effects. Like he's created all these fonts that communicate his sounds, while somebody like Workman, who always used typography, like type design in his sound effects, is great for um, some things. Like I mean, for me, like I think he's great at everything. But when I'm trying to imitate what he's doing, I can do it in these specific realms. Um, while somebody like Clem Robbins is great at kind of doing sound effects that look like a lot like his balloon lettering, and Tom Orzechowski is sort of my guiding star because his lettering style was so regimented and so like precise, but then his sound effects were like so fluid. It just like within a balloon he would like communicate like five different things using those sound effects. So honestly, if you read my Hellblazer run, like that I did with like Cy Spurrier, Aaron Campbell, etc., like the lettering in that is kind of my tribute to Tom Orzechowski. It's just like me trying to do all this stuff. Yeah, but it's all of those things where. Sometimes I'm reading a particular artist and a particular lettering artist, and I'm just more inspired. You know how like novelists say that I read this novelist for a little while and then I started writing like them.
Mm.
That happens a lot. Then often, for example, in Isola, with Carl Kerschel and Brendan Fletcher, a lot of those sound effects did not have a language, right? They were like kind of glyphs.
Mhm.
So, and we created this glyph language slightly based on like inspired by manga. So for that, I looked at a lot of
Mm.
manga to kind of see how they split the sound effect a lot of the time, how those sound effects go outside the panels a lot of the time, which Western comics don't tend to do. So it's all of these things. It's like just it's about the art, it's about the project, and it's about whatever I am obsessed with
Mm.
at the time. So even once in a while, I'll collaborate with the colorist on this, where once in a while I feel like I think I need to letter the sound effect on the inks and then send it to the colors so that they can color.
Mm.
Yeah. So if you look
Okay.
at World Tree, all the sound effects are like that. Like I've done the sound effects and then sent them to Jordi Belair, who has just like elevated them. Like, you know?
Oh, okay. I love that I would not have expected that, but now that you say that, and I'm thinking of something like now that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Man, like I said, the graphical design elements of some of that stuff is stuff that I just like I nerd out about all the time. So I was just like,
Yeah.
oh my god.
No, honestly, this is the stuff that I could talk about all day
I
because
love this.
this is the thing that I'm obsessed with in real life. Like you look at those books and it's all like photography and design stuff.
Yeah.
So it's all
Uh,
me trying to kind of say, okay, how can I use this thing in my work? How can I use
mhm.
that thing in my work? And yeah, it's all just that. Like that's the
Amazing.
stuff that excites me.
All right. Well, okay. So we got to start talking about In Your Skin at some point. So we might as well do it now. This you've worked on so many comics at this point, but this your first big one as a writer in a while, especially like doing an Image book. Um, does this feel like your first comic, or does it feel like something different?
It absolutely feels like my first comic, to the point where Ram once had to remind me that hey, you've done this before, you made comics before, like you know how to do this.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So I think with lettering, I am part of the crew, right? I'm
Mm.
like the bass player or whatever. So I'm not the face of the comic. And
Mhm.
I was very happy with that because one of the things that used to make me very anxious in my first lettering, like first writing career, was the idea that in some ways people are judging me when they
Mm.
read a story that I've done. Um, I'm in a much better position about that now because I kind of feel much more like I know what I'm doing,
Mhm.
um, both with the lettering and with the writing. Like I'm much surer about what I'm trying to say with things. But I still have this thing that wait, the audience doesn't know Aditya Bidikar, the writer, at all.
Mm.
Like I've done like 3 short comics in the last 5 or 6 years. I've done a few prose short stories, but those are never read by the comics audience. Like it's a whole separate audience, actually, weirdly enough. Um, so I have no idea how people will receive my comics. So it kind of, in that way, it feels like a first comic.
Mhm.
Mm.
Does that does that change how you approach the work at all? Because like you said, like being part of the crew, you're a part of a lot of crews, right? And so you're in the lab and you see how it all kind of comes together. And so when you're putting this together for you, what are some of the things that you have to do to make sure that it feels you, right? Or like not only in it being your story and your baby in that way, but now, because correct me if I'm wrong, this is a project that you've been kind of sitting with and tinkering with for a little bit, and so I'd love to hear a little bit maybe more about some of the starts and stops to then inevitably get you to get pushed off the fence to make the book a reality.
That's another very good question. Yeah, that's a bit of a thinker. I knew I'm not very calculating about the things that I want to write. Like
Okay.
I don't think about audience. I don't think about what would people like to see from me.
Sure.
etc. Because I don't think uh, reading in your skin, if you read my lettering work, I don't think you can see those two connecting. Right. So when I came back to lettering, I knew that it, it's purely a luxury in some ways. Like, I don't have to do this. I can just keep lettering. I don't think anybody needs a book from me. Um, Nobody would complain if I, like, in 30, 40 years, I die as known as Aditya Bidikar, the letterer. So this is purely for me. Like, I'm doing this because I want to. So I wanted to start with a story that I wanted to do and that I felt nobody else would do.
Hmm.
So In Your Skin is not the only one of those, because like I have 2 or 3 things coming over the years which will be exactly like these are the books that I want to do, and like books that I feel you know, that old thing where if you keep reading books and you feel like, hey, I'm not really finding what I want, you got to write it.
Yep.
This is one of those. Right. So I first came up with this idea in 2019, approximately 2019, when I remember narrating it to Anand RK about it. And he was like, oh, whenever you do this, I'd love to be involved. So he's done a cover for us for issue 1.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about the things that I am interested in, which is like, I was actually chatting with Anand about this, and he's like, one of your big themes is worship. So I'm very interested in the idea of worship. Like, considering something outside yourself greater than yourself in some way, right? And this kind of coalesced over time. I think in 2022, when I was putting it together, there were a couple of options. Like, there was another thing I could have done first. And both of these things are things where I feel like these are signature works, in the sense of I can put this in front of people and say that, okay, this is what I like to write. Are you interested in this? Right. So I wanted my first book back as a writer to be one where this is me, unvarnished, and however you like this, that's me. So you know, if I put this book out and everybody was like, okay, we hate this, I just understand something about that, and then I can maybe go back to lettering and I can maybe write stuff and not publish it. I can be like a JD Salinger about it. Right. But I believed that there was something interesting here that more people would be interested in. So, uh, yeah, like it was a priority for me that this should be unvarnished in some ways. Where I mean, obviously, I'm going to put as much work and thought into it as I can, but it's not an aesthetic compromise in any way. Was very important to me. Right. Uh, so yeah, like that was a big thing where while coming back to writing, my biggest question to myself was consistently that what do you want to see out in the world that maybe nobody else does? Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Before we get too far into this, I'm going to let you give you the opportunity to just set the stage on what In Your Skin is about.
Right. So In Your Skin is the story of Priyanka, who is a Bollywood super fan. So she has grown up obsessed with the movies of this actress called Ayesha Sen. And in India, that often means that like you memorize the dialogues from a particular movie, you memorize the dance sequences, like you can do them note for note. And she has grown up kind of building her identity around this. And one day she gets the opportunity to meet Aisha, and something goes wrong with that. And then very soon after that, when Aisha declares that she's going to retire, Priyanka decides that he can take over from Aisha. And then that happens in, like, the book is a body horror book, so you can sort of think in some ways how that works.
Going back to what you said about your fascination with the thought of worship and this story feels so timely, just given the like the parasocial relationship that I think we all have, or that a lot of people have with influencers, right? Like there's, or like there's crazy stuff going on right now with a bunch of reality TV stars, and the way that you see people come out to either defend them or not or whatever is kind of nuts. Um, for you, I guess it feels like the book could have gone in a few different directions. So, like, for you, when did you realize what the book was actually about? And then inevitably take it in that direction.
Right. You hit upon something very crucial there, that this book was actually inspired by me looking at the parasocial relationships that people were developing with YouTubers and Twitch streamers, etc., in 2019. And I looked at that and I was like, oh, wait, I come from a country where like the entire country does that for like this thing. Right. So that's how it kind of started. And that's why it had to be about Bollywood, because I was like, okay, I like this, like this is exactly the same thing, where you obsess over details of their lives. You kind of read into their lives like it's a text almost. And so the first iteration of In Your Skin, which was called something else, and I keep not giving the title because it's kind of a spoiler for the actual story. That one was much more about the fandom aspect of it, like specifically the internet fandom about it, because Bollywood also has these forums where people kind of gossip about the stars, where they kind of try to dig into details. They put up paparazzi shots. They put up fake nudes and stuff. It's just horrifying. It's just awful.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to kind of talk about somebody who is a part of that kind of fandom. But that story felt kind of unfinished, so I put it aside. And then then the pandemic happened, where all of this kind of got 10x'd in some ways, because people are sitting at home alone, and now they had nothing but these influencers and these stars, reality TV stars, etc. So when I came back to the story, I was like, oh, what I was trying to say there, I think everybody kind of sees already. So let me approach this in a slightly different way. Let me actually think about who this person is, who this character is, and kind of give it that kind of flavor. And so then I also got interested in, well, what is the star like? What is her life like? So you're going to see parts of her life a lot more in issue 2 and beyond. So the story grew that. Like originally it was so much more about the internet fandom, but then it became about how I started thinking more deeply about, okay, what is the disconnect? Firstly, what is the disconnect between somebody like me and somebody like these people, where why can't I see what's going on here? And then I started looking in other places, and I realized that, oh, like this is also religion in a certain way, where people do very extreme things because of the things they believe and the things that they like. Right. So let me try and dig deeper and see where it all comes from. So that kind of led to it. Actually.
So then how do you get into the head of someone like Priyanka, right? Like who are the celebrities and or streamers that maybe you are a little too close with, to, like, because I say, right, because like I feel like in order to really understand that, like, you've got to really kind of dig a little deep. And so for you, how do you begin to, right, because like the story could be, it's very easy, I think, for this to become a very idea-driven book, but it's because of characters like Priyanka and everything else that really that ground this. But you also, like, having read the book, it feels very real, almost like this is a life that you've lived in some fashion. So I'd love to just see, like, what does the research look like, but then research is usually just a set of facts, right? And in how this works, but being able to translate it into something that feels real in a character is is a totally different kind of work. How walk me through the building of Priyanka and the world kind of around her and some of the other characters.
So a lot of it was in fact research,
Mhm.
specifically about Bollywood. But I think on a character level, I didn't research the book. I don't think that
Okay.
that was what I was trying to express
Mhm.
at all. But what I did for the characters was just look around me.
Mm.
So Priyanka is like, a kind of a conglomeration of like 5 or 6 different people that I
Yep.
know who either have her temperament or have her kind of obsession,
Okay.
or simply like, or her self image in some ways.
Mm.
Um, but of course, like every character I write is coming from me in some way.
Sure.
So I wasn't able to access the fandom aspect of this because
Mhm.
I like people's work. I don't really like the closest I have come to. Um, I mean, I do often read something and then get kind of obsessed with everything else that that creator has done. I listen to interviews and so on, but there it's kind of like a vampire, almost like I want to get their ideas. I want to kind of understand how they think so that I can maybe integrate some of that into my work. Like for example, like I read every other interview that Alan Moore does, or like David Milch who wrote Deadwood. So where like if I respect the work a lot, then I want to see where it came from and I want to access the kind of thought process that goes into it.
Mhm.
But it's not about the person really. It's about this kind of more slightly magical, mystical thing that is the mind.
Right.
Um, and like everybody that I have idolized in some way as a creator has probably done something that disappoints me, but it doesn't really bother me because it's not about them. It's
Mhm.
about the thing that they've done. And like I remember I've had several opportunities to meet people who've done something I really loved, and I was like, I'm okay. I don't
Yeah.
need to do
Look,
that.
that is one of the best impulses I think you can have
Yeah.
at times. It's where when I was at Comic Book, there was a lot of opportunities like that for
Yeah.
me, and I thought to myself, "Oh my gosh, I would really love to interview this person or meet this person or whatever." And then I'm like, "But you know what? That may ruin the magic for me. So I'm just going to let them continue to be what I think they are to me, then know what they are to me because that would ruin it."
Yeah. True. I guess the way I think about it is that is meeting this person once gonna do something for me? Right. Like
Yeah.
if I meet them once, they might disappoint me,
Sure.
or they might dismiss me. Like, I mean, if I'm coming across as a fan, like I don't like if I see an actor eating in a restaurant, I generally don't tend to bother them because I'm like,
Oh yeah.
they're
Right.
living their
Right.
life. So I don't want to be that person for a creator I love, right?
Sure.
What would be more interesting if we have a continued interaction? Like I get to
Mhm.
talk to them as a creator, not as a
Mhm.
fan. Right. Like I mean, I've worked with several people whose work I really admire,
Mhm.
and we don't have like fan conversations. We have creator conversations. Right. So that's interesting to me. But like this idea of, oh, I look up to you. Like I will even tell them like, okay, something you did here changed my life. Like I've sent this book to a few people where I have been clear that, look, your work has really influenced me or changed me, and I would love to know what you think about this book. But that's as, oh, I'm your protege that you did not know you had. Right. Like it's not a fan thing. Um, on the other hand, I am an obsessive person. Like
Okay.
if I get my hands on something new that I'm interested in, I kind of tear it apart to figure out how it works. And I know that if not used well, this obsessive trait can be quite destructive as well. Like
Mm.
you can either obsess about something so much that you get bored of it, and then that thing no longer brings you joy, or you can get so obsessed about it that you can be solipsistic. Like you can be it can turn into a monofocus where you lose the other textures of your life, right? So that is something that I absolutely could pull from, like that tendency
Mhm.
that like I've had a like in my teenage I've literally lost like 3 weeks to reading about like one album by Pink Floyd or something like that. you know like, and then every conversation with my friends was then like, oh, did you know that at minute 12 like they do this and this is referring to do this thing, when my friends are just like, when will you stop talking about this? Um, so
uh,
that is something that I could very easily access, and
mhm.
I have a fairly vivid memory of it. So
Right.
that, I'm sure like some of Priyanka is just that.
Perfect. Okay, so then there's a bit of, like you said, that there's a bit of body horror in this, and so this is a book that definitely has some horror elements to it. What how do you decide to lean into that to help express the story versus any other kind of way to do it, right? Because then I think what you then inevitably build there is, I think the story inevitably has a level of tension to it already. And then when you add some of those horror elements, it really is dialing up the notch a bit. How do you make sure you don't dial it up too far?
I think there's a possibility that people might read like issues 3 and 4 and think that we've gone too far.
You've turned it up too far.
Yeah, because it does kind of ramp up throughout
Okay.
the series.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a very nice question to be asked, because it's kind of thinking about what body horror is. Like, I'm not trying to write a horror story. I'm trying to write a story which uses a certain aesthetic as a tool to explore some things that I feel couldn't quite be explored the same way without that. So, like, if you look at Cronenberg, for example,
Mm-hmm.
Cronenberg, it never feels like Cronenberg finds it horrific, right? It's often a beautiful thing for him. It's sometimes an ugly thing for him, but it is something about what makes us human. Right. And I use body horror in a similar way, where um like Dan Waters wrote about the issue in his newsletter, and he really kind of hit upon what one thing I was trying to do, which is look at certain ideas from the perspective of what skin is.
Mm.
Like the book is titled In Your Skin, and I don't want to kind of give away my themes and
Right.
stuff here, but the idea that skin is essentially a permeable membrane that
Mm-hmm.
separates us from everything else, right? Like, I am me because I am covered in this particular skin, right?
Right.
Right. If you kind of remove that and disperse me throughout the universe, I become the universe, right? So this is the thing that keeps me separate from it, and that's true for every single one of us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I was very fascinated by, um, like philosophically thinking. Like, here's this very thin membrane that is all that's making you you.
Mm.
And what happens when that membrane gets not torn exactly, but
Right.
yeah, like,
Yeah. No, I
like,
get it
let's
totally.
leave it there.
Uh, Psalm feels like the perfect artist for this book. It talked. How did you guys connect? Right, and then at one point, one of the things that I think interests me a little bit is that, like, this story has been yours for a very long time, and now you're sharing it, right, with, by getting more people involved. So how did we get Psalm involved, and then what did they bring to the story that maybe you saw in your head but maybe weren't necessarily expecting?
Hmm. When I started scripting, I think the first issue, this was the first draft. Like, this was the draft that I wrote
Mm-hmm.
Of the whole story before Som was involved. Because this is my first book, so I wanted to kind of make sure that I was doing it right. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
give myself time to figure out the whole story first, etc. And Eric Harburn, who's the editor of this series, and I were discussing who would be appropriate. And I think literally the first artist that Eric suggested was Som. And Eric said that, okay, like he's done this book called Crocodile Black. And I know Som already. Like Som and I move in this very similar circles in Pune,
Mhm.
sorry, in India. And we actually, like I lettered his work for a pitch a long time ago that didn't really go
Okay.
anywhere. So I knew he was very talented. And I then went, like, I read Crocodile Black, and immediately I was like, okay, I can absolutely see this person doing this. Then I did a deep dive on his Instagram, and I realized that he is actually interested in some of the similar, like, textural um, body horror things that I am.
Mm.
Right. And I loved what he was doing there. So I was like, I told Eric, like, okay, look, if we can get this guy, we just get this guy. So let me talk to him. So I hit him up and I said, okay, I'll come to Mumbai, we'll sit over drinks and I'll narrate the story to you and you tell me what you think. And when I narrated the story, the first thing he said is that you're describing my world. And that's when I found out that Som had worked in Bollywood for many years as a concept artist and a production designer. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so this is something I didn't know at all. And I was like, wait, okay, so I can stop doing my research and I can just give you the script and you like you know exactly what needs to be done at any particular point. So that was very lucky that we got this person who a lived in Mumbai, had the lived experience of like what Mumbai is like, is a visually very observant person. So he is very interested in the little things about Mumbai that make it specifically that city. Plus, has the Bollywood experience
Mhm.
and is very clearly interested in the same kind of grotesquerie and horror that I am.
Mhm.
So even when discussing like the body as a site for horror,
Mhm.
we were on the same page on those. Like there were very long discussions we had about like what the tone is going to be and how the visuals need to kind of accentuate that tone, and he was just on board for all of that. And he's just put in so much character work into the visuals that
Mm.
I almost felt like, okay, I need to step up my game as well. I need to think this deeply as well. Like just today we had a conversation where he called me up and said like, hey, there's this one logistical thing that I was wondering that goes from like issue 1 to issue 3. Like, what do you think about it? And I was like, oh, it's wonderful that you thought about it, because I had thought about it and here's my solution for this. But I just didn't put it in the script because I was like, okay, this is something that the audience can kind of figure out if we just give them enough visual aids. But I love that he was kind of tracking the same things that I was doing. And so like it's just been like a fantastic
Oh,
experience
that's
working with
that's
him on
awesome.
this. Yeah.
Uh, in so I guess so. One of the things I don't know why it fascinates, this part of the comic building process fascinates me so much, but I'm always so interested in folks' decision on uh if they go full script or not, as far as like description. And so for you, I have to imagine you've seen a number of different kinds of scripts in that say, where is your happy place in that? And do you feel, I mean, obviously, like, with Psalm, like this is your first like kind of big book, but you've obviously done comics and stuff before. Where's your happy place in that? Are you a full script guy, or do you kind of let it, does it become a little bit more jazz to you?
For this first one, at least, I think I needed to be a full script guy.
Hmm.
Um, because I needed to figure out how much I require a page to contain.
Hmm.
It's not even about whether Som does it exactly like that.
Right.
Som tends to stay with the number of panels I've given. Um, there are some pages where I have a note to Som saying, "Look, this one, it really doesn't matter if you use the same number of panels that I've done.
Okay.
It really now doesn't matter if you hit the same beats. As long as we get from here to here, it's all good." And there are other pages where I kind of need those beats to be hit. Um, Som will generally stick to the number of panels that I've done, but he'll play with the size quite a bit, and he'll play with the shoot, like the shot,
Hmm.
right? Because I mean, of course he should, because the
Sure.
shot is just me trying to describe to him what is important about this panel. What am I trying to communicate with this panel? And then if he can do that, or if he can do that in a different way but better way, he's just welcome to do that. Originally, we did discuss doing it like screenplay style early on, but I think that would have been a mistake because I needed to learn how to budget a page over such a long duration. Like I know how to budget a page over like 10 pages, but over 120 pages, you really need to learn how to, okay, how much does a page contain? What is the most important thing about this page? Am I overcrowding it? Is it too loose? So this is one of those books where the scripts have lost pages and pages have been added over different versions.
Okay.
Right. Like the first issue, script that nobody ever saw, like other than me, was 8 pages longer. And then before I even sent it to Eric, I kind of brought it down to like 36 pages. And then we lost 2 more pages by the time it went to Som.
Okay.
With the other issues, it's not really been that much, but we have had conversations about like, okay, do we need 1 more page for the sequence, etc. I think issue 2 gained like 2 pages in between drafts. And now I feel much more confident about, okay, I know how much a page does, what a page is doing. It's also like here, I need to admit that I'm still learning certain things about comics, even though I've worked in comics for like 13 years now, where I would talk to Ram, and Ram has very clear ideas of how his pages look. And I'm like, okay, I don't have those yet, but now I do. Like now because I know what information a page can convey, I can now sort of see the design in my head. But I don't think for the first 2 issues, I would say that it was a lot more about, okay, what are we trying to do and how much can fit in a page, much more than how does the page look. Yeah, like I mean, we absolutely did design like individual images and characters, etc. But that kind of like, what I'm talking about when I say page
for sure.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
I think Som is carrying a lot of the like doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this one, and hopefully in issue 3 and 4 I'm doing my part a lot more. But that is something that I'm still kind of getting to grips with, I'd say.
So obviously you're lettering this, and for yourself, does that become a hurdle, or is it like, oh no, this is the easy part for me? Like is there a point where you feel you maybe can get too precious about it, and is that where you need someone like, say, an Eric or whatever to say like, you're thinking about this too much? Because like this is yours now, right? Like, and so not only you're working at the front end of the process, but also towards the tail end, and so like, do you fiddle with it much, or do you have to like tell yourself, no, I've done this part already, I've written it, it works, it fits, and I'm doing it?
That's funny because there's like multiple answers to this, weirdly. So when we first started planning the project, I suggested to Eric that I might hand letter this. And Eric was like, Aditya, I think you this is your first book. I think you might want to revise a little bit. So let's not do that. So building the font was kind of like, I wouldn't say like a consolation prize or anything, but it was like, when I started doing it, I immediately realized that was the thing to do. Like, okay, thank God we did that. And the first issue, like as Som would send in thumbnails, I would kind of copy paste the dialogue on the pages, and then I would rewrite it. And I think we've got like 18 drafts of issue 1 in the lettering, like as in there are 18 PDFs that read completely differently from each other.
Wow.
But that's only for issue 1.
Okay.
Because
you had to get it all out of your system. That was
exactly. And there was a point at which I would send one of those to Eric, and Eric would look at the artwork and how the lettering is fitting, and then we talk about the artwork. And I was like, hey, did you read the rewrite? And he was like, no. I will read this when we are near the end. Like when you are actually lettering this, that's when I'll read it. Because what he realized, and it took me time to realize, was that all of this was for me. Like I was doing all these rewrites, and that was for me, honestly. The book did change a lot. Like I
So it even changed a lot, even in the run up to what is the final version of issue 1.
Absolutely. Because I would see what Som is doing and I would see how Som is pacing the scene, and then I would rewrite. And the thing is that while I had these people's voices fairly clear in my head, um, I, as I was watching Som's art come in and as I was writing issue 2, I kind of knew a lot more about what needs. It was much more about the flow of information. Like, okay, what kind of needs to go here that will pay off later, etc. Like, it was a lot of technical stuff, and I was also overwriting a lot that I needed to pull back. Like, there were a lot of things that I had written into dialogue so that Som would know what this scene is about, and then when his art comes in, like he's done most of the communication of that, so I can pull back on the dialogue. Um, it was also something where I feel like a lot of writers do this with issue 1, where issue 1 is the one that changes the most between the script and the final version, because as you are writing the rest of it, as you are revising issue 1, you really figure out what this book needs to be. So by the time I'm coming to issue 2, I think I'm changing like a couple of lines here and there where Som has done something. So I'm like, okay, let me just not have this. Or Som had an idea that then let me to have an idea that I can do something in the dialogue here. But issue 1 it was fun, and I'm glad I got to do it because I was the letterer. I don't think I would have been able to do it otherwise.
Right.
It just let me run off a lot of steam, I would say.
Okay,
like,
fair. Do you think though, had you, like, let's say Eric said we should get someone else to letter this. Like, would that have happened, or were you doing like, there's no way in hell I'm letting someone else touch this. This is mine. I'm doing it.
Yeah, not for this one. Not
okay.
For this.
Yeah, that's
one.
Look, that's fair.
But also, the way I write like a letterer. Like, you can sort of when you read my scripts, you can tell how I'm thinking this should be lettered as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure like that would be handy for another letterer to have, but I think I would be very nitpicky about it. I don't think I'd be fun as a writer for another letterer to work with. I did get Haas involved in this book though. So Haas is a fairly close friend of mine who is also a letterer. So I sent him the PDF once I'd lettered the first, like not the first draft, but like the first lettered version.
Mm-hmm.
I sent that to him and I said, like, look, I've lived with this story for a very long time. There might be tricks that I'm missing. Yeah, like there might be things I could do as a letterer that are not occurring to me because I've lived with this story for so long. So can you sort of give me notes? And he gave me some very, very good notes that I integrated into the whole thing. Right. Like, for example, the narration is entirely in lowercase, mixed case, while the dialogue is in uppercase. That was something that came out of a discussion with Haas where he was like, we could separate these better if we do this. And, that kind of thing.
Love that. All right. I'll ask one more question and then I'll let you go. You've been so gracious with your time. What is the thing that you're hoping a reader takes away as they pick up the book from the shelf in April?
My hope is always to do something that changes the person reading it. Because that's what I hope. When I'm sitting down to read a comic, read a novel, or watch a movie, my hope is that I'm not the same person after. And so my hope, which is fairly ambitious, I would say, is that once the reader has finished reading In Your Skin, I don't want them to be the same person anymore. Which is very ambitious, I would say. And I'm okay to fail at it because I think it's worth trying.
I love that. Ajay, this has been phenomenal. Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. And for those listening, your last chance to pre-order In Your Skin #1 is Monday, March 30th. So make sure you get to your local comic book shop. You know the spiel. Make sure you pre-order 3 copies, one for you in a different room, and one for you to give to a friend. Those are the rules. I don't make them. That's just it's just what we have to do. And but if you're listening to this after the fact, maybe you're listening to this when the first issue comes out. Hopefully, this gives you a little bit of insight into what Aditya is trying to do with this book, and maybe treat it as not necessarily a commentary track, but more a behind-the-scenes chat on how this all came together. Aditya, again, thank you, man, so much. I appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you. This was great. Thanks.